A medical student drowning in debt was delivering food at 2 in the morning when gunshots shattered the silence. He ran toward the sound and found a woman on cold pavement while security's guard fled in terror. Without thinking, he dropped to his knees, pressed his bare hands against her wounds, and fought to keep her alive for 12 agonizing minutes. He saved her life that night. But what happened next would destroy everything he had ever worked for. And yet somehow, it would also give him something far greater than he ever dared to dream. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you watching from. We love to hear your thought. The fluorescent lights of Memorial General Hospital buzzed overhead like angry insects trapped in their fixtures. Lucas Bennett stood in the supply closet, his hands raw from sanitizing solution, counting the hours until his shift ended. 23 years old, and already he felt like an old man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. $186,000. That was the number that haunted him every waking moment. The student loan debt that wrapped around his future like a noose, tightening with each passing month. $186,000 to become a doctor, to fulfill the dream his mother had whispered to him on her deathbed when he was just 15 years old. "Promise me, Lucas," she had said, her voice barely a whisper. Her hand, so thin and fragile, had gripped his with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll help people. Promise me you'll become the doctor who would have saved me if we could have afforded one." He had promised, he had held her hand and wept, and promised with every fiber of his being. And he had kept that promise, even when it meant working 3 jobs simultaneously just to stay afloat. Even when his body screamed for rest and his mind begged for mercy. The medical school internship paid nothing. $0. They called it an educational opportunity, as if the privilege of being worked to exhaustion for free was something to be grateful for. The hospital administrators spoke of building character and paying dues, but Lucas knew the truth. They were exploiting young people desperate enough to accept any terms, no matter how unfair. During the day, Lucas delivered food on his beaten-up motorcycle. Tips were unpredictable, customers often cruel, but it was flexible enough to work around his other obligations. In the evenings, he stocked shelves at a grocery store until midnight, his back aching as he lifted boxes and arranged products that he himself could barely afford to buy. And then, from 1 in the morning until 7, he worked as an unpaid intern at the very hospital that would someday grant him the credentials he needed to become a real doctor. No health insurance. A medical student without health insurance. The irony was not lost on him. If he got sick, if he broke a bone, if anything went wrong, he would be ruined. More ruined than he already was. His apartment was a single room in a building that should have been condemned years ago. The heating worked intermittently. The water ran brown every 3rd day. His neighbors were drug dealers and prostitutes and other desperate souls clinging to the bottom rung of society's ladder. But it was cheap, and cheap was all Lucas could afford. He ate once a day, usually whatever he could scavenge from the hospital cafeteria when no one was looking. Expired sandwiches, bruised fruit, the remnants of meals that paying customers had left behind. Pride was another luxury he could not afford. Lucas emerged from the supply closet with fresh linens, nearly colliding with Dr. Harold Collins, the chief of surgery. Collins was everything. Lucas was not wealthy, connected, born into a family that had produced physicians for 4 generations. His white coat gleamed under the hospital lights, spotless and pressed, a stark contrast to Lucas's faded scrubs. His shoes alone probably cost more than Lucas made in a month. "Watch where you're going, Bennett," Collins snapped, brushing imaginary dirt from his sleeve where Lucas had grazed him. His lip curled with disgust, as if he had touched something unclean. "Sorry, Dr. Collins." Collins paused, looking Lucas up and down with an expression of mild contempt. He had the eyes of a predator, cold and calculating, always assessing weakness. "You know, Bennett, I've been meaning to have a word with you." "Yes, sir, I see how hard you work." The other interns, they complain about the hours, the lack of pay. They talk about unionizing, about fair treatment. Collins laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "But not you, you just keep pushing. Day after day, night after night, never a complaint." Collins stepped closer, and Lucas could smell his expensive cologne, the scent of wealth and privilege that clung to him like a second skin. "Do you know why that is?" Lucas remained silent, sensing a trap. He had learned long ago that men like Collins did not ask questions to receive answers. They asked questions to make points. It's because you have no choice, Collins continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You're not the future of medicine, Bennett. Let's be honest with each other. You're just cheap labor, a warm body to fill the gaps. The real doctors, the ones who will actually make a difference in this field, they don't come from wherever you came from. They come from families like mine. He straightened his coat, smoothing the lapels with manicured fingers. My grandfather was a surgeon. My father was a surgeon. My son will be a surgeon. That's how medicine works. It's passed down through generations, through blood and breeding, not through whatever you think you're doing here. The words hit Lucas like a physical blow, but he kept his face neutral. He had learned long ago that showing emotion was a luxury he could not afford. Showing emotion gave people like Collins power over you. It revealed your vulnerabilities, your weaknesses, the cracks in your armor that they could exploit. Is that all, Dr. Collins? Collins smiled, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. The kind of smile a cat might give a mouse before pouncing. Just making sure we understand each other. Now get those linens to room 407, and try not to embarrass yourself. Lucas walked away, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. $186,000 in debt, and he was nothing more than free labor to men like Collins. The system was broken, rigged against anyone who did not have the right last name or the right bank account. He passed other interns in the hallway, young men and women from wealthy families who treated their unpaid positions as networking opportunities rather than survival necessities. They complained about the coffee quality and the limited parking. They had no idea what real struggle looked like. But Lucas did not resent them. He resented the system that had created them, the invisible barriers that separated those born into privilege from those born into poverty. He resented a world where a person's worth was measured by their bank balance rather than their character. But he would not quit. He could not quit. His mother's voice echoed in his memory, "Promise me you'll help people." He would keep that promise, no matter what it cost him. No matter how many Dr. Collinses stood in his way. No matter how many times the world tried to convince him that he did not belong. The city was different, at 2 in the morning. Quieter, yes, but also darker in ways that had nothing to do with the absence of sunlight. The streets that bustled with life during the day became hunting grounds for predators of all kinds. Drug dealers lurked in doorways. Prostitutes walked their corners with tired eyes. The homeless huddled in alleys, trying to stay warm, trying to stay invisible. Lucas guided his motorcycle through the empty streets, a bag of food strapped to the back. Emergency delivery to some fancy hotel downtown. The Grand Continental, where rooms cost $500 a night and the guests ordered $70 steaks at 2 in the morning because they could. Because money meant never having to wait, never having to want, never having to experience the indignity of going without. The order had come in just as Lucas was about to collapse into bed. His body had begged him to ignore it, to let someone else take the delivery, to choose sleep over the $15 tip that might or might not materialize. But $15 was $15. $15 was 3 days of food if he was careful. $15 was the difference between making rent and being thrown out on the street. So he had dragged himself out of bed, pulled on his hoodie, and ventured into the night. He pulled up to the side entrance of the Grand Continental Hotel, the engine of his bike sputtering in protest. The motorcycle was held together by hope and duct tape, a patchwork of repairs accumulated over years of hard use. The exhaust pipe was secured with a wire hanger. The seat was wrapped in plastic bags to cover the tears in the leather, but it was all he had, and it got him where he needed to go. The hotel loomed above him, all glass and marble and gleaming lights, a monument to excess in a city full of people who had nothing. Lucas felt small standing in its shadow, insignificant, invisible. That is when he heard it. A sound that cut through the silence like a knife. Gunshots. 2 of them, in rapid succession. Lucas killed the engine and ducked behind a parked car, his heart hammering in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to leave. To get back on his bike and disappear into the night. This was not his problem. Whatever was happening around that corner was none of his business. He was a delivery boy, not a hero. He had his own problems, his own struggles, his own survival to worry about. Getting involved in something like this could get him killed. Or arrested. Or worse, but then he heard something else. A woman's voice, weak and trembling. "Help, somebody, please. The voice was faint, barely audible above the ringing in Lucas's ears, but it cut through his fear like a blade. A human being was dying. A human being was calling for help, and everyone else was running away. Lucas peered around the car. In the glow of the hotel's emergency lights, he saw a woman lying on the pavement. Blood pooled beneath her, spreading like dark wine across the concrete. She was trying to crawl, her movements weak and uncoordinated, leaving a smeared trail of red behind her. A security guard stood frozen near the entrance, his face white with terror. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and imposing, the kind of man you would expect to run toward danger rather than away from it. But his hands were shaking, his eyes wide with panic. And then before Lucas could process what was happening, the guard turned and ran. He just ran. Left her there to die. Abandoned his post, abandoned his duty, abandoned a dying woman because his own safety mattered more than her life. Lucas did not think. His body moved before his mind could catch up. He sprinted toward the woman, dropping to his knees beside her, his delivery bag forgotten somewhere behind him. Ma'am, can you hear me?" The woman's eyes fluttered open. She was older, maybe in her late 60s, with silver hair now matted with blood. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. Even in the dim light, Lucas could see she was fading fast. Her lips were turning blue. Her hands were cold. "I've been shot," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, each word an effort. I think they wanted to kill me. Don't try to talk, I'm going to help you." Lucas's hands moved automatically, years of medical training taking over. He assessed the wounds, 2 gunshots, one to the upper chest, one to the abdomen. Arterial bleeding from the chest wound. Possible damage to the lung. Internal hemorrhaging, almost certain. Without immediate intervention, she had minutes to live. Maybe less. He ripped off his hoodie, tearing the drawstring from the hood. His fingers found the pressure point on her subclavian artery, pressing down hard to slow the bleeding. With his other hand, he fashioned a makeshift tourniquet from the drawstring, securing it around her upper arm. "Stay with me," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos in his mind. "Help is coming, you just need to stay with me." The woman's hand found his, her grip surprisingly strong. Who are you?" "My name is Lucas, I'm a medical student, I'm not going to let you die." "Why?" Her eyes searched his face, confusion and gratitude warring in her expression. "Why are you helping me? You don't know who I am. You don't know anything about me." Lucas looked at her, this stranger bleeding out on the cold pavement, and he thought of his mother. Of the hospital bed, where she had died, because they could not afford treatment, of the promise he had made. "I don't need to know who you are," he said quietly. "I only know that if I walk away you will die. And I cannot let that happen." 12 minutes, that is how long Lucas held that woman's life in his hands. 12 minutes of maintaining pressure, of talking to her to keep her conscious, of watching for the signs of shock and adjusting his treatment accordingly. 12 minutes of praying that the ambulance would arrive in time. He talked to her constantly, forcing her to respond, forcing her to stay present. "What's your name?" "Evelyn," she whispered. "Evelyn Cross, that's a beautiful name. Tell me about yourself, Evelyn. Do you have family?" "A daughter, we're estranged. Haven't spoken in years." "Why not?" "I chose my work over her. Biggest mistake of my life. When this is over you should call her. Life's too short for regrets." Evelyn managed a weak smile. "You're very wise for someone so young." "I've seen a lot of death," Lucas admitted, "more than I should have. It teaches you things, makes you realize what matters." When the paramedics finally arrived, they found Lucas covered in blood, his hands still pressed against the woman's wounds. They had to pry him away, assuring him that they would take it from here. "You saved her life, son," one of the paramedics said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Another few minutes, and she would have been gone. The tourniquet, the pressure, you did everything right." Lucas watched as they loaded the woman into the ambulance. She was still alive. Against all odds, she was still alive. He did not know it then, but that night would change everything. The woman he had saved was Evelyn Cross, one of the wealthiest and most powerful business leaders in the country. And the men who had tried to kill her were still out there, watching from the shadows, waiting to see what would happen next. The news broke the next morning. Evelyn Cross, billionaire philanthropist and founder of Cross Industries, had survived an assassination attempt. The story dominated every channel, every newspaper, every social media feed. Speculation ran wild about who had targeted her and why. Political rivals, business competitors, foreign agents, everyone had a theory. But the story they told was not the truth. Lucas watched the press conference from the break room at Memorial General, exhaustion pulling at every muscle in his body. He had not slept since the night before, could not sleep with the images of blood and gunfire still fresh in his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Evelyn's face, pale and frightened, her life slipping away beneath his hands. On the screen, Dr. Harold Collins stood at a podium, flanked by his team of surgeons. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Collins basked in the attention, his posture straight, his expression humble in a way that seemed rehearsed. "Mrs. Cross is stable and recovering," Collins announced, his voice dripping with false modesty. "It was touch and go for a while, but thanks to the quick actions of my team here at Memorial General, we were able to save her life. The surgery lasted 6 hours, and I am proud to say that it was a complete success." Lucas's coffee cup slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. Hot liquid splashed against his legs, but he barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the screen, his mind struggling to process what he was hearing. No mention of the young man who had kept Evelyn Cross alive for 12 crucial minutes. No mention of the makeshift tourniquet, the pressure applied to her wounds, the voice that had kept her conscious until help arrived. According to Collins, the heroics had begun the moment she arrived at the hospital. "Lucas," one of the nurses approached him, concern in her eyes. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "The records," Lucas said, his voice hollow. "I need to see the emergency room records from last night, the Evelyn Cross case." The nurse hesitated, her expression shifting from concern to uncertainty. "Lucas, I don't think that's a good idea. Dr. Collins specifically said that the case files are restricted. Only senior staff can access them. Why, I don't know. He just said they were. Something about patient privacy and media concerns." She touched his arm gently. "Lucas, what's going on? You're scaring me." But Lucas was already walking away, his mind racing. He found a computer terminal in an empty office and logged into the hospital's medical records system. His access was limited, interns were at the bottom of the hierarchy, allowed to see only what their superiors deemed appropriate, but he had been working here long enough to know a few workarounds. What he found made his blood run cold. The emergency room intake report had been altered. The section describing the patient's condition upon arrival had been completely rewritten. According to the modified record, Evelyn Cross had arrived at the hospital in critical but stable condition. There was no mention of the first responder care, no mention of the tourniquet, no mention of Lucas Bennett. He had been erased. "What do you think you're doing?" Lucas spun around. Dr. Collins stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Behind him the hallway was empty. They were alone. "You changed the records," Lucas said, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. "You took my name out, you took credit for what I did." Collins closed the door behind him, his movements deliberate and unhurried. "I corrected an inaccuracy, Bennett. You're not a licensed physician. Whatever you did out there on that street, it was unauthorized medical intervention. If anything, you're lucky I didn't report you for practicing medicine without a license. I saved her life, you stabilized her." Collins corrected, his tone patronizing. "My team saved her life. There's a difference, one that you apparently are too inexperienced to understand." Lucas stepped toward him. "You're lying. You're standing in front of cameras taking credit for something you didn't do. You're building your reputation on my work." Collins's mask of composure slipped, revealing something ugly beneath. His eyes hardened, his jaw tightened, and for a moment Lucas saw the predator that lurked behind the polished facade. "Let me make something very clear to you, Bennett. You are nobody, you have nothing. You are $186,000 in debt, and the only thing standing between you and complete financial ruin is your continued enrollment in this internship program. An enrollment that I can terminate at any time for any reason. You can't do that, I already have." Collins smiled that cold reptilian smile. As of this morning, you have been removed from the program for violating hospital protocols, specifically for unauthorized access to restricted patient files, the very files you were just caught looking at. The room tilted. Lucas grabbed the edge of the desk to steady himself. Your scholarship has been revoked, Collins continued, relishing each word. Your student loan servicer has been notified that you are no longer enrolled in an accredited program, which means your loans are now in default. The full balance is due immediately. $186,000. I wonder how you'll pay that. You can't. That's not. I can and I have. Collins opened the door. Security will escort you out. And Bennett, if you try to go public with your little story, I'll destroy you. I have lawyers, connections, resources. You have nothing. Don't forget who you're dealing with. Two security guards appeared in the doorway, their faces impassive. Lucas allowed himself to be led away, too stunned to resist. In the space of 12 hours, he had gone from saving a woman's life to losing everything he had worked for. Outside the hospital, the morning sun was bright and indifferent. Lucas stood on the sidewalk, his belongings in a cardboard box, and wondered how the world could be so cruel to those who only wanted to do good. The video appeared online 3 days later. Grainy, shaky footage from a street camera near the Grand Continental Hotel. It showed a figure in a hoodie kneeling beside a fallen woman, hands pressed against her wounds, working frantically to keep her alive. The internet exploded. Mystery hero saves billionaire Evelyn Cross, the headlines screamed. Who is the good Samaritan who kept her alive? It took less than 24 hours for someone to identify Lucas. A former classmate recognized his motorcycle in the background of the video. A neighbor confirmed his face from a photograph that circulated on social media, and suddenly Lucas Bennett was no longer nobody. He was everywhere. But the public's reaction was not what he expected. The world, it seemed, was divided. Half of the people calling him a hero, the other half calling him something far worse. Just another poor kid looking for his 15 minutes of fame, one commentator sneered on a cable news show. He probably staged the whole thing for attention. These people will do anything to escape their circumstances. If he was really that talented, he wouldn't be working as a delivery boy, another added, nodding sagely. Let's be honest, folks, if he was really that good, he would not be poor. Success finds those who deserve it. The words cut deeper than any knife. Lucas read the comments from his cramped apartment, unable to look away from the screen even as each new message felt like a fresh wound. The eviction notice still hung on his refrigerator, a countdown to homelessness that ticked closer with each passing day. He's just trying to get rich by attaching himself to Evelyn Cross, probably hoping she'll give him money. Classic grifter move. These people have no shame. I heard he got kicked out of medical school for being incompetent. Now he's pretending to be a hero to cover up his failures. Look at where he lives. Look at his background. This is exactly the kind of person who would exploit a tragedy for personal gain. Dr. Collins, it seemed, had been busy. Anonymous sources were feeding stories to reporters: Lucas's financial troubles, his dismissal from the internship program, rumors of unprofessional conduct and boundary violations. Each new revelation painted him in a darker light. The attacks were coordinated, methodical, designed to destroy his credibility before he could tell his side of the story. Collins had resources Lucas could not imagine: public relations firms, media contacts, lawyers ready to threaten anyone who dared to challenge the official narrative. A reporter showed up at his door, microphone extended, cameraman hovering behind her. Lucas Bennett, what do you say to accusations that you're exploiting Mrs. Cross's tragedy for personal gain? I didn't ask for any of this, Lucas said, his voice tired. I just tried to help someone who was dying. But isn't it convenient that you happened to be there, that you happened to be the one to save one of the richest women in America? Some people are saying this was all planned. Planned? Lucas almost laughed. I was delivering food at 2 in the morning because I needed the money. There was nothing planned about it. Then why won't you go on record? Why won't you do interviews? If you're innocent, why are you hiding? Lucas closed the door in her face. That night, sitting alone in the darkness, he wondered if doing the right thing had been a mistake. He had saved a life, and for that, he was being punished. The system that was supposed to reward goodness instead seemed designed to crush it. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. He almost did not answer, but something made him press the green button. Mr. Bennett, a woman's voice, professional and clipped. My name is Margaret Holloway. I'm the personal assistant to Evelyn Cross. Mrs. Cross has regained consciousness and is asking to see you. Lucas's heart skipped. She wants to see me. She's been quite insistent, demanding actually. Can you come to Memorial General tomorrow morning at 9? Lucas thought of the security guards who had escorted him out, of Dr. Collins and his threats, of the reporters who would surely be waiting. I was banned from the hospital, he said. There was a pause, and then Margaret Holloway's voice came back, sharp with something that sounded like anger. That ban no longer applies. Mrs. Cross has made certain of it. She has significant influence with the hospital board. Will you come? Lucas looked around his empty apartment, at the eviction notice taped to his refrigerator, at the stack of overdue bills on his table, at the darkness pressing in from every corner. Yes, he said, I'll be there. Evelyn Cross's hospital room looked nothing like the rooms Lucas had cleaned during his internship. Fresh flowers filled every surface, roses, lilies, exotic orchids that probably cost more than his monthly rent. A private nurse sat in the corner, reading quietly. The machines monitoring her vital signs were the latest models, sleek and silent, nothing like the aging equipment in the regular wards. A security detail waited outside the door, men in dark suits with earpieces and suspicious eyes. They had searched Lucas twice before allowing him to enter, checking every pocket, every fold of his clothing, as if a poor kid from the wrong side of town might be carrying weapons or ill intent. But it was the woman in the bed who commanded Lucas's attention. Evelyn Cross was smaller than she had seemed on the pavement that night. More fragile. Her silver hair had been washed and combed, and her face, though pale and lined with pain, radiated an intensity that made Lucas understand how she had built an empire from nothing. Close the door, she said to her nurse. And give us some privacy. When they were alone, Evelyn studied Lucas with eyes that missed nothing. They were sharp eyes, intelligent eyes, the eyes of someone who had spent a lifetime reading people and situations. You're younger than I expected, she said finally. Younger than you sounded that night. I'm 23. 23. She shook her head slowly. I have grandchildren, older than you. And yet you did something that grown men twice your age were too cowardly to do. I just did what anyone would have done. No. Her voice was firm. That's not true. And we both know it. The security guard ran. The other people in that area ran. Everyone ran except you. She paused, her expression softening. I've been trying to piece together what happened. My memory of that night is fragmented, broken into pieces by pain and blood loss. But I remember your voice. I remember you telling me to stay with you. She paused. I remember believing you. I'm glad you're okay, Mrs. Cross. I'm not okay. I was shot twice by men who wanted me dead, and I'm lying in a hospital bed instead of running my company. But I'm alive, and my doctors tell me that's because of you. Her eyes hardened. So imagine my surprise when I watched the press conference and heard Dr. Collins take credit for saving my life. Lucas said nothing. I asked to see the emergency room records, Evelyn continued. Do you know what I found? Or rather what I didn't find. My name was removed. Erased, like you never existed. Evelyn's voice trembled with anger. I had my people dig deeper. They found the original version before it was altered. They found the paramedic reports describing the tourniquet you made from a hoodie drawstring, the pressure you applied to my wounds, the 12 minutes you kept me alive while that coward security guard ran away. She struggled to sit up straighter, wincing with pain. Her nurse moved to help, but Evelyn waved her away. They also found out what happened to you afterward. How Collins had you expelled from the program. How he revoked your scholarship and put your loans in default. How he's been feeding stories to the press to destroy your reputation. Her jaw tightened. How he's trying to erase you completely. He warned me not to say anything. Lucas said quietly. He said he would destroy me if I talked. Of course he did. Men like Collins always do. They protect their power by crushing anyone who threatens to expose them for what they really are. Evelyn fixed him with a look that cut right through him. Do you know how I built Cross Industries, Lucas? Can I call you Lucas? He nodded. I grew up poor. Not just struggling, but poor in a way that most people cannot imagine. My father left when I was 6, just walked out one day and never came back. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us fed, and she still couldn't make ends meet. I wore the same dress to school every day because it was the only one I owned. The other children mocked me, called me names, made my life miserable. She paused, her expression distant, lost in memories that clearly still hurt. The system tried to break me too. When I was starting my first company, a man much like Collins tried to steal my ideas, my patents, my future. He told me that women like me didn't belong in business, that I should go back to where I came from, that I was reaching above my station. What did you do? I fought. I fought until I won, and then I made sure that man could never do to anyone else what he tried to do to me. Evelyn's eyes met his. If a person who saved my life can be destroyed for doing the right thing, then this system deserves to be burned down and rebuilt from the ground up. Lucas felt something shift inside him. For days he had felt helpless, hopeless, beaten, but looking at this woman, this survivor who had clawed her way up from nothing, he felt a spark of something he thought he had lost: hope. The press conference was held 1 week later. Evelyn cross-checked herself out of the hospital against the advice of her doctors. When she stepped onto the small raised platform in front of the microphones, she moved like someone carrying broken glass inside her body. Each step came slowly, carefully, the rubber tip of her cane pressing hard against the polished floor. She leaned on it not for balance but for survival, her knuckles white around the handle, the tendons in her forearms standing out like cords. She stopped at the podium and did not speak immediately. The room was full of camera flashes, dozens of them going off in rapid succession, creating a strobe effect that made the faces of the reporters blur together. The air smelled like coffee and wool coats, and the particular staleness of rooms that had been closed too long. Someone coughed. A chair scraped against the floor. Evelyn gripped the edge of the podium with her free hand. Her fingers trembled slightly, though whether from pain or something else, no one could tell. She looked out at the sea of faces, at the red recording lights on the cameras, at the boom microphones, hovering overhead like mechanical birds. She took a breath, then another. "I'm here today to correct a lie," she said. Her voice was stronger than her body suggested it should be. It filled the room, bounced off the walls, silenced the whispers that had begun to rise in the back rows. 1 week ago, Dr. Harold Collins stood at this very podium. She paused. Let the words settle. He claimed credit for saving my life. Another pause, longer this time. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, until reporters began shifting in their seats, until someone in the front row cleared their throat. He said his team performed a miraculous surgery. Flash, flash, flash. He said they were heroes. Evelyn's eyes swept across the room. They were sharp, focused, burning with something that went beyond anger. When she spoke again, her voice dropped lower, almost intimate, as if she were sharing a secret. "That is not true." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions over each other. Hands shot up. The flashes intensified, becoming almost continuous. Someone knocked over a tripod. A camera operator cursed. The noise built and built until it was almost unbearable. But Evelyn raised her hand. Just that. One hand, palm outward, fingers slightly spread. The noise subsided. Not immediately, but quickly. Within seconds, the room had fallen silent again. She had that kind of presence, that kind of power. The ability to command a space with nothing more than a gesture, to make people wait for her, to make them understand that she would speak when she was ready and not before. The true hero of that night, she said, was a 23-year-old medical student named Lucas Bennett. In the front row, a woman from the Times scribbled furiously, "A young man who was delivering food at 2 in the morning." Evelyn's voice caught slightly. She paused, pressed her lips together, continued. "That was one of 3 jobs he worked to pay for medical school." Somewhere in the back of the room, a door opened. Heads turned, then turned back. A young man who heard gunshots, and instead of running away like everyone else did, she stopped, looked down at the podium. When she looked up again, her eyes were glistening. "He ran toward me." The words hung in the air. Evelyn gestured to someone standing in the shadows at the edge of the stage. Lucas stepped forward into the light, squinting against the sudden brightness. He was wearing the only suit he owned, a navy blue one he had bought at a thrift store for job interviews 3 years ago. It was slightly too big in the shoulders. The collar of his white shirt was frayed at the edges. He had not wanted to do this, had not wanted the attention, the cameras, the exposure. He had argued against it for hours, sitting in Evelyn's hospital room, while she lay connected to monitors and IV lines. "I just want to go back to my life," he had said. "I just want to finish school and become a doctor and help people quietly. And Collins will continue destroying other lives quietly." Evelyn had replied. "Other students, other patients, other families who can't fight back." Lucas had not answered. "The truth needs to be told," Evelyn said. "Not for you, for them." So here he was, standing in front of cameras, feeling the weight of 100 stares. "Lucas Bennett kept me alive for 12 minutes, Evelyn continued. "He used a drawstring from his hoodie as a tourniquet." The screen behind her flickered to life. An image appeared. Lucas's yellow hoodie, now stained dark brown with dried blood, laid out on an evidence table. The drawstring was missing, cut away, leaving the hood loose and misshapen. He applied pressure to my wounds with his bare hands. Another image, Lucas's hands, photographed that night, covered in blood up to his wrists. The lines of his palms were visible, etched in red. A murmur ran through the crowd. "He talked to me, kept me conscious, refused to let me give up." Evelyn turned slightly, looked at Lucas. He stood very still, his face unreadable. "And when I arrived at the hospital," she said, turning back to the cameras, "when Dr. Collins's team finally took over," she paused. The room held its breath. It was only because Lucas had given them someone to save. Silence. Then a single voice from the middle of the room. "Mrs. Cross, are you saying Dr. Collins lied about the surgery?" "I'm saying more than that." The screen behind her changed again. A document appeared, dense with text, official hospital letterhead at the top. After that night, Dr. Collins erased Lucas from the hospital records. A red circle appeared on the document, highlighting a section where text had clearly been deleted and rewritten. The font was slightly different, the spacing was off. He expelled him from the internship program. Another document, this one a formal letter, Collins's signature at the bottom. He revoked his scholarship. A third document, a notice of default from the student loan office. He put him in default on his student loans. In the front row, the woman from the Times had stopped writing. She was staring at the screen, mouth slightly open. He fed lies to the press to destroy his reputation. A collection of headlines flashed across the screen. Hero delivery driver questioned, Good Samaritan or reckless amateur. Patient advocate raises concerns about unlicensed medical intervention. Someone in the audience muttered something. Someone else shushed them. "And he did all of this," Evelyn said, her voice rising, "to protect himself from the truth." The screen changed one more time. Side by side, two versions of the same document. The original emergency room report on the left, the revised version on the right. "That a poor kid from nowhere," Evelyn said, "did what Collins and his expensive team could not." The differences were highlighted in yellow, names removed, times changed, entire paragraphs deleted or rewritten, revised, red. A watermark in the corner of the right-hand document. The timestamp showed it had been modified less than 48 hours after Evelyn's arrival at the hospital. A low whistle came from somewhere in the crowd. Someone laughed, a short disbelieving sound. "Dr. Collins is not a healer." Evelyn's voice had changed. It was harder now, sharper. "He is a predator who has used his position to enrich himself while patients suffered." More documents appeared on the screen. Emails, dates, names. A chain of correspondence between Collins and hospital administrators, discussing how to handle what one email called the Bennett problem. And he is not alone. Financial records now, payment histories, insurance denials. "This hospital," Evelyn said, "this system has protected men like him for too long." The final document appeared, a list of names, 17 of them. Beside each name, a date. Beside each date, 2 words, deceased, natural. The room had gone completely silent. "That ends today." Outside the hospital, visible through the windows of the conference room, a crowd had gathered. They were different from the angry mob that had called Lucas a fraud just days before. Different in posture, different in energy, different in purpose. They carried signs. Justice for Lucas, one read. Health care for all, said another. The poor deserve doctors too. A woman at the front of the crowd held a photograph of a young man, her son perhaps, or her brother, someone she had lost. The tide had turned. The hearing room was packed to capacity. Television cameras lined the walls, their operators standing motionless behind them, adjusting focus, checking angles. Reporters filled every available seat, notebooks open, pens ready, recording devices placed strategically on the long tables that ran the length of the room. The wooden panels on the walls were old, polished to a deep shine that reflected the overhead lights. The American flag hung limply in the corner, unstirred by any breeze. The air conditioning hummed somewhere overhead, too cold, making people shift in their seats and cross their arms. At the center of it all, two men faced each other across a polished table. Dr. Harold Collins looked smaller than he had in the hospital corridors. His suit, expensive and well-tailored, seemed to hang on him now, as if he had shrunk in the weeks since Evelyn's press conference. His face was thinner. There were dark circles under his eyes. He kept touching his collar, adjusting his tie, running his fingers along the edge of the table. The arrogance that had once defined him was gone. In its place was something that looked almost like fear. Lucas sat across from him, calm and steady. He had not slept well in weeks. His appetite had disappeared somewhere around the third day of preparation meetings with lawyers. His hands had a slight tremor when he held them still for too long. But in this moment, he felt more alive than he had in years. The fear was still there, lurking beneath the surface, a cold weight in his stomach, but it was overshadowed by something stronger, a sense of purpose, a belief that what he was doing mattered. The committee chairman, a gray-haired man with reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, shuffled through papers at the front of the room. He cleared his throat. This hearing is now in session. The murmur of conversation died away. Dr. Collins, you have been summoned to address allegations of falsifying medical records, wrongful termination, and abuse of authority. Collins's lawyer, a thin man in a gray suit, leaned close and whispered something. Collins nodded, a quick jerky motion. How do you plead? Collins leaned toward his microphone. His voice when he spoke was steady, but there was a tightness around his mouth that betrayed him. I categorically deny these allegations. The room was silent, waiting. Everything I did was in accordance with hospital protocol and standard medical practice. The chairman removed his glasses, cleaned them on his tie, replaced them. Hospital protocol, his eyebrows rose, including altering emergency room records to remove accurate information about patient care. A muscle twitched in Collins's jaw. The records were corrected to reflect accurate medical terminology. He paused. His lawyer made a small gesture with his hand. Continue, Mr. Bennett is not a licensed physician. His actions on the night in question, while perhaps, Collins hesitated, searched for the right word, well-intentioned, could be construed as practicing medicine without a license. I was protecting the hospital from liability. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone coughed. A camera operator adjusted his equipment, the movement creating a soft whirring sound. Lucas felt his hands tighten into fists beneath the table. He forced himself to relax them, one finger at a time, kept his expression neutral, remembered what the lawyers had told him. Don't react, don't give them anything to use. And his expulsion from the internship program, the chairman pressed. Collins straightened in his chair. This question he had prepared for. Mr. Bennett violated hospital policy by accessing restricted patient files. I had no choice but to remove him from the program. He paused, looked directly at the chairman. It was a matter of professional ethics. The restricted files, the chairman said slowly, that documented your alteration of the original records. Collins's face reddened. A bead of sweat appeared at his hairline. I don't see how that's relevant to the FORC. I think it's very relevant, Dr. Collins. The chairman picked up a stack of papers, held them up for the room to see. We have testimony from 6 nurses who witnessed you ordering the record changes. Collins's hand moved toward his collar again, stopped, returned to the table. We have the original paramedic reports that directly contradict your version of events. The chairman set down the papers, picked up another stack, and we have emails, Dr. Collins. The room was completely silent now. Even the air conditioning seemed to have stopped. Emails in which you discuss, and I quote, he found the relevant page, adjusted his glasses, burying the Bennett problem before it becomes a liability. Lucas thought of his mother. The memory came unbidden, unwanted, her face in the hospital waiting room, gray with exhaustion and fear. The forms they had filled out together, listing their income, their assets, their insurance status. The receptionist's expression when she saw the numbers. "I'm sorry," the receptionist had said. "Without insurance we can't." "But she's dying," Lucas had said. The receptionist had not looked at him. Collins's lawyer was speaking now, trying to regain control of the narrative. "Your Honor, my client has dedicated his life to saving lives. These accusations are nothing more than I'm not finished." The chairman's voice was sharp. The lawyer fell silent. "Furthermore, our investigation has uncovered a pattern of behavior spanning more than a decade." Lucas's mother had died 3 weeks later, at home, in the bedroom they shared in their one-bedroom apartment. Lucas had held her hand at the end, had watched her breathing slow and stop, had sat with her body for 2 hours before calling anyone, because he knew that once he made that call, it would be real. Patients denied treatment because they lacked insurance. The death certificate had listed cancer as the cause of death, which was true, in a way, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was that his mother had died because she was poor, because the hospital had calculated the cost of her treatment against the likelihood of payment, and had found the numbers unfavorable. Medical students exploited for free labor. Lucas forced himself back to the present. The hearing room. The cameras. Collins's face across the table, pale and sweating. Complaints suppressed, evidence destroyed, careers ruined. The chairman set down his papers, all to protect your reputation and your position at the hospital. Collins's lawyer tried to speak again. "We have records of at least 17 patients who died under questionable circumstances, because they couldn't afford the treatments Dr. Collins deemed necessary." The number hung in the air. 17. 17 people whose deaths were attributed to natural causes, but whose families were never informed of alternative options that might have saved their lives. Collins stood up suddenly. His chair scraped against the floor, the sound loud in the silent room. His lawyer grabbed his arm, but Collins shook him off. "You want to know the truth?" His voice was different now, higher, strained. "Fine." He spread his hands on the table, leaning forward. "Yes. I changed the records." The confession hit the room like a physical blow. Someone gasped. A camera flash went off, then another. "Yes. I expelled Bennett." Collins's face was twisted now, the professional mask completely gone, replaced by something raw and ugly. "And yes," he paused, drew himself up to his full height. "I would do it again." His lawyer was pulling at his sleeve, hissing words that Lucas couldn't hear. Collins ignored him. "Do you know what would happen if we let every delivery boy with a hero complex call himself a doctor?" His voice rose, filling the room. "The entire medical establishment would collapse. There are rules, protocols, hierarchies." He jabbed a finger at Lucas. "They exist for a reason." Lucas met his eyes, did not look away. "People like him," Collins's finger was shaking now, "don't belong in medicine. They never have, and they never will." The room was silent, waiting. Lucas thought about what the lawyers had told him. Don't engage. Don't respond to provocations. Let the evidence speak for itself. But some things couldn't be left unanswered. He stood slowly. His chair did not scrape. He moved carefully, deliberately, the way his mother had taught him to move when he was angry and wanted to throw things. "And people like you." His voice was quiet but clear. "People who let patients die because they can't afford your fees." Collins opened his mouth to respond. Lucas continued before he could speak. "People who steal credit." The words were not loud. They didn't need to be. "People who destroy anyone who threatens their power." Lucas paused, looked at Collins directly. "Where do they belong?" Collins's face contorted. His hands clenched at his sides. For a moment Lucas thought he might lunge across the table. "You think you're better than me." Collins's voice was almost a snarl now. "You're nothing. You came from nothing." His finger jabbed at Lucas again. "And when this is over you'll go back to nothing." Lucas did not move, did not blink, did not raise his voice. "Hero." The single word fell into the silence like a stone into still water. I don't think I'm better than you. Collins's face twisted with confusion. This was not the response he had expected. I just think that a poor person's life isn't worth less than a rich person's life. Lucas paused, let the words settle. And that's something you will never understand. The chairman cleared his throat. Dr. Collins. Collins turned slowly as if waking from a dream. Based on the evidence presented, this committee is recommending immediate suspension of your medical license pending a full investigation. Hero. Collins's lawyer surged to his feet. Furthermore, Memorial General Hospital will be subject to a comprehensive audit of its practices and policies. This is outrageous. My client has a right to woe. The gavel came down, once, twice, 3 times. It was over. 3 months had passed since the hearing. Dr. Collins had been stripped of his medical license. Criminal charges were pending, multiple counts of fraud and negligence and falsification of records. His face appeared regularly on the evening news, always the same photograph, the one taken at his arrest, his expression stunned and empty. Memorial General had undergone a complete restructuring. The old board of directors had resigned, replaced by new leadership that promised to treat all patients equally, regardless of their ability to pay. Whether they would keep that promise remained to be seen. Promises were easy, change was hard. And Lucas Bennett had become a symbol, not just a hero, though they called him that too. Something more complicated. A reminder that the system could be fought, that the powerful were not invincible, that doing the right thing, even when it cost everything, was still worth doing. He received letters, hundreds of them, from patients who had been turned away from hospitals, from medical students who had been exploited by their programs, from families who had lost loved ones and never understood why. Some of the letters thanked him, some asked for help, some just wanted him to know that he was not alone. He read every one. Evelyn Cross summoned him to her office on a crisp autumn morning. The leaves had begun to turn, painting the city in shades of gold and red. The air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of wood smoke and distant rain. Her corner office occupied the top floor of the Cross Industries building, accessible only by private elevator. The walls were glass floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. From here you could see everything. The wealthy neighborhoods to the north, with their tree-lined streets and manicured lawns. The poor neighborhoods to the south, with their crumbling buildings and empty lots. The gleaming towers downtown. The abandoned factories by the river. The promise and the failure of American capitalism, all laid out like a map. Evelyn had recovered fully from her injuries. The cane was gone. She moved now with the same fierce energy that had built her empire, pacing behind her massive desk, her heels clicking against the polished floor. But something had changed in her. A softness around the edges, a thoughtfulness that had not been there before. She paused sometimes in the middle of sentences, looking out the window, seeing something that existed only in her memory. "Lucas," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "Thank you for coming." "Of course, Mrs. Cross. Please," she smiled, and for a moment she looked almost grandmotherly. "Call me Evelyn, we've been through too much for formality." Lucas sat. The chair was leather, soft and expensive. He felt out of place in it, the way he always felt out of place in rooms like this. Evelyn sat down across from him. "I asked you here because I want to make you an offer." Lucas waited. "I've already paid off your student loans." The words hung in the air. "All $186,000. Lucas opened his mouth. Evelyn held up her hand. "Consider it a gift, no strings attached." He tried to speak again, to protest, to say that he couldn't accept it, that it was too much, that he hadn't done what he did for money or reward. Evelyn was still talking. "I'm not finished." She leaned forward, her eyes intent. "I also want to fund your medical education, the best schools, the best residency programs. Everything paid for." Lucas's mind was racing. Numbers, possibilities, the calculations he had done 1,000 times, lying awake at 3 in the morning, trying to figure out how to make it all work. No more delivering food at 2 in the morning. The delivery app on his phone. The cold nights. The apartments where people wouldn't open the door until he was halfway down the stairs. No more stocking shelves until midnight. The grocery store. The fluorescent lights. The ache in his back and feet at the end of every shift. "Just focus on becoming the doctor you were meant to be." The words should have filled him with joy. Instead he felt a strange hollowness in his chest. Evelyn stood and walked to the window. The city spread out below her, vast and indifferent. "And when you graduate," she said, her back to him, "I want to place you in my private healthcare network. We have hospitals and clinics across the country, serving the wealthy, the powerful." She turned to face him. "Top salary, top benefits, the best of everything." Lucas stared at her. "You would never have to struggle again." The words echoed in the silent room. "You would have security, prestige, everything you've ever worked for." Evelyn paused. Her expression was unreadable. "All I ask in return is your loyalty." Lucas did not answer. The silence stretched between them. Outside the window, a helicopter passed, its rotors beating the air. Far below, traffic moved in slow rivers of light. He thought about his apartment. The cramped single room with its leaking radiator and stained ceiling. The refrigerator that was always empty because groceries were a luxury he couldn't always afford. The mattress on the floor because he had sold his bed frame to make rent. He thought about the years of exhaustion, the double shifts and triple shifts, the textbooks he had read by flashlight because his electricity had been cut off, the meals he had skipped to buy supplies for school. He thought about how easy it would be to say yes, to finally rest, to finally stop fighting. The word formed in his mind, almost escaped his lips. Yes, but then he thought about his mother. Her hands, that was what he remembered most clearly. Her hands, rough and calloused from years of cleaning other people's houses. Her hands, holding his face when he was small, telling him that he was going to be something special. Her hands, growing weaker in those last weeks, barely able to grip his fingers. He thought about the promise he had made, standing beside her bed, holding those hands, watching her eyes close for the last time. "I'm going to change things," he had said. "I'm going to make sure this never happens to anyone else." He thought about all the people like her who were still out there, dying because they couldn't afford care, dying because the system had decided their lives weren't worth the investment. "I can't accept." The words came out quietly, almost a whisper. Evelyn's eyebrows rose. "May I ask why?" Lucas looked at her, then looked past her, out the window at the city spread below. "Because if I take your offer," he said slowly, "I become a doctor for rich people." The words were hard to say. Each one felt like a stone in his throat. A doctor who treats the privileged few while everyone else suffers. He shook his head. "That's not why I went into medicine. That's not the promise I made to my mother." Evelyn studied him for a long moment. Her expression was thoughtful, appraising. "Lucas, you can do more good from inside the system than outside it. You can change things from a position of power." Maybe. He was still looking out the window. The poor neighborhoods were visible from here, barely, just a smudge of gray on the southern horizon. "But I would lose myself in the process." He turned back to face her. "If I trade my freedom for security, I will have betrayed everything I believe in, everything I've fought for." His voice caught. He paused, continued. "Everything my mother died hoping I would become." The room was silent. Evelyn studied him for what felt like a long time. Her face was unreadable, her eyes searching his for something he couldn't identify. Then slowly she smiled. "You know," she said, "when I was your age someone made me a similar offer." She walked back to her desk, but didn't sit. Instead she leaned against its edge, her arms crossed. "Safety, security, success," she paused. "All for the price of my independence." Lucas waited. "A man who wanted to buy my company, my ideas, my future." She looked out the window. "I turned it down too." "What happened?" Evelyn gestured at the office around them. The glass walls, the mahogany desk, the empire she had created. "I built this not because someone gave it to me, but because I earned it. Because I stayed true to who I was, even when it would have been easier to compromise." She turned back to him. "I respect your decision, Lucas, more than you know." She sat down in her chair, her manner shifting, becoming more businesslike. "But let me make you a different offer, one that doesn't require you to compromise your principles." The clinic stood in the poorest part of the city, a converted warehouse that had been transformed into a beacon of hope. The neighborhood around it was rough. Abandoned buildings, empty lots, streets where gunshots echoed at night, and ambulances rarely ventured. The kind of place that society had forgotten. that politicians mentioned only during election season before forgetting again. Lucas walked through the front doors on the first day, still unable to believe that this was real. The Cross Community Health Initiative, funded by Evelyn's foundation, but run by Lucas, a place where anyone could receive medical care, regardless of their ability to pay. A place where the poor and the forgotten would be treated with the same dignity and respect as the wealthy and powerful. It had taken 6 months to build, 6 months of planning construction, recruiting staff, navigating bureaucracy, 6 months during which Lucas had completed his medical degree, finally earning the credentials he had sacrificed so much to obtain. 6 months of learning that changing the system was even harder than fighting it. Evelyn had offered him the money, but she had not offered him protection. She had not shielded him from criticism, had not smoothed his path, or made things easy. She had not attended the opening ceremony or posed for photographs. This clinic, this dream had been built with Lucas's own sweat and determination. "I'm not helping you because you need it," she had told him during their last meeting. "I'm helping you because you can do it, because you've proven that you have the strength to change things. Now prove it again." The first patients began arriving before the doors were officially open. A mother with 3 children, none of whom had ever seen a doctor. An elderly man who had been rationing his medication for months because he could not afford refills. A young woman with a cough she had been ignoring because she could not afford to have it checked. Lucas treated them all, not as charity cases but as human beings deserving of care and compassion. He learned their names, their stories, their struggles. He stayed late when they needed him, and came early when they had nowhere else to go. Word spread quickly. Within weeks the clinic was overwhelmed. Lucas worked 18-hour days, training volunteers, treating patients, building something that would outlast him. The work was exhausting. The challenges were endless, but for the first time in his life, Lucas felt truly alive. He thought often of his mother during those early months, of her gentle hands and her tired eyes, of the way she had smiled even when the pain was unbearable, of the promise he had made. "I'm doing it, Mom," he whispered sometimes, late at night, when the clinic was empty, and the weight of the day pressed down on him. "I'm helping people, just like you asked." One evening as he was preparing to close for the night, a familiar face appeared in the doorway. Evelyn Cross, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, without the trappings of wealth that usually surrounded her. She looked like any other grandmother from the neighborhood, come to check on a sick grandchild. "How does it feel?" she asked. Lucas looked around at the clinic, at the photographs on the walls of patients who had been helped, at the small altar someone had erected in the corner with candles and prayer cards and tokens of gratitude. He looked at the worn chairs in the waiting room, the second-hand medical equipment that worked perfectly well despite its age, the handwritten signs in multiple languages welcoming everyone who entered. "It feels like this is what I was meant to do," he said. Evelyn nodded. "You know, people have asked me why I invested so much in you. Why I didn't just write a check and walk away like I usually do. What do you tell them?" "I tell them the truth." She smiled, and there was warmth in it now, genuine affection. "That you reminded me of something I had forgotten, that the measure of a person's worth isn't in their bank account or their credentials or their connections, it's in their character, in their willingness to help others without expecting anything in return." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. "My life didn't change because you saved me, Lucas. It changed because you reminded me why I built this empire in the first place. Not for money, not for power, but to make a difference. To help people who couldn't help themselves. Somewhere along the way I had lost sight of that. You helped me find it again." Lucas felt tears prick at his eyes, but he blinked them back. "Thank you, Evelyn, for believing in me when no one else did." "Thank yourself," she said. "I just opened a door, you're the one who walked through it." She turned to leave, then paused at the threshold. "Oh, and Lucas, there's someone waiting for you outside. A young woman named Sarah. She was one of your first patients. Her daughter had an ear infection, and you stayed late to make sure she was properly treated." Lucas remembered. Sarah had been terrified when she arrived, convinced that her daughter's fever meant something terrible, ashamed that she could not afford a regular doctor. Lucas had spent an hour with them, explaining the diagnosis, prescribing antibiotics, showing Sarah how to recognize warning signs in the future. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Evelyn smiled. "No, she just wanted to tell you something." She said she wanted you to know that you gave her hope, that because of you, she believes things can get better, that her children can have a future. She walked away, leaving Lucas standing in the doorway of his clinic. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Sarah stood on the sidewalk, her daughter in her arms, waving shyly. Behind her, other people from the neighborhood had gathered, the elderly man with his medication, the young woman with the cough, families who had been helped, and families who would be helped in the days to come. Lucas waved back. He thought about his mother, about the promise he had made to her all those years ago. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the injustice and the pain, the moments when he had wanted to give up, the people who had tried to destroy him and the people who had believed in him. And he thought about the future, the patients he would treat, the lives he would change, the world he would help build, one act of kindness at a time. My life didn't change because I was saved, he whispered to himself. It changed because someone believed I deserved a chance. He stepped outside, into the fading light, ready to begin the work that would define the rest of his life. The neighborhood was still rough, the challenges were still enormous, but Lucas Bennett was no longer the scared young man who had delivered food at 2 in the morning, counting his tips and wondering if he would ever escape poverty. He was a doctor now, a real doctor, serving the people who needed him most. And somewhere he knew, his mother was watching. And she was proud. Before we go, let me know where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because tomorrow we've got something truly special for you. A story that will remind you that no matter how hard things get, there is always hope. There is always kindness. And there is always a reason to believe that tomorrow can be better than today.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.